Hey folks, this is Chris at Art Secret Studio, and I'm here to show you how Sargent, while in Capri, tones his canvas 4 different ways in a very short time, possibly a week or two. Don't really know that for sure. But what's interesting about that is quite often artists get in the habit of toning their canvas, wiping one color over the whole painting, whether it was brown from Titian and the burnt umbers, or maybe some gray kind of green from the French Academy. What happens with that is artists get in this rut of always toning it the same way, a recipe. And what Sargent shows the world is that the underneath tone can set the mood for the entire painting. And I'm hoping that you might reevaluate what you choose. So I took an excerpt from a much bigger video and just took a clip out of it just to introduce you to this concept. If you like it, we have more videos on our website, as our website is growing daily, and I hope you enjoy it.
That I'm hoping becomes second nature for you is that you start to look at the photograph and you start to, or the scene outside, and you start to experience your emotional feelings. And for some of you, we may have to have some side counseling that it's okay to have feelings. And you're looking for a color that's going to capture the emotional feeling or the actual likeness of the day. Because maybe it's just a blue color you're after and it has no emotional feeling. It would have to have a feeling, but we'll skip that. So in this Sargent painting, he paints it all brown and you can see the burnt sienna wash everywhere. And then he leaves it on the edges of everything. And it's ironic for me. Usually it's the color of the water that says, oh, look at the beautiful watercolor that's evoking the message. But for me, it's the tone of the canvas and leaving that tone that's carrying the message. So the next painting that you look at, you're starting to see that, okay, you know, what's the color that I could tone this painting? And it's kind of a greenish brown. So knowing that all paintings before 1860 are really mostly called tonal paintings because they're about contrast and not color, then you know it's the horseshoe palette with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna as your grays. And it's not very pretty, but boy does it work when it's about contrast, and it's so easy. And I see burnt sienna mixed to everything, all the greens, the yellow greens, the blue, it's in everything, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. So I might tone this, the color of the grass in the foreground right on the bottom. And what you've done is you've set the darkness for the scene. And then at the top, it's a bluer green for the going higher and farther and cooler. If I tone it a viridian and burnt sienna on the bottom, then it's negative and scary and ominous. So if I keep the warmer psychological feeling of the sap green, then I'm saying sap green with burnt sienna has a more positive feel. Now, it doesn't matter to me what you tone it. I'm just saying these are the things that run through my head. And because of my childhood, it's the way I think. And therefore, you may not want to listen. Does that make sense, though? So in this painting, it's really about the light that we talked about from Sargent doing the cathedral, and it's being cut off, but I don't want to remove the cameras. So, you know, it's a light yellow ochre for the bathing of the warmth and what it means to know that you go through life not alone. And that's what he's doing here with that transparent wash on the walls where you can see through the paint. So when you paint this wall, the walls on the edge, we talked about in the morning class, the void of brushstrokes was very important, and that there'd be a stillness to the day. And I don't have to move the camera out. You know, there's arches at the top that say Gothic arches, right?
First question for you.
Yeah.
Would you ever tone it like cad yellow pale instead of the ochre?
Oh, sure.
And you knew you were going to put the violet.
But then you run the risk of making the painting about color and not contrast. Because you're using a color. Earth tone's really not a color. You know, I mean, it is and it's not. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing, you know, and talking to Sarah about plein air painting, it's up to you to experience the moment and say, what would I capture it to? What I was doing in yesterday's class that I forgot about today is I showed examples of paintings about shape, and then paintings about contrast and pattern and texture and color. And then I showed some current artists today and what they were doing and how they were painting. And I said, what do you see here? And I'm telling them the first thing that you're looking for is color, contrast, pattern, texture, shape. Don't look at the subject matter. You're looking for an element of art first. What am I seeing? So when you're outside painting, instead of looking at everything, simplify it in your head. Quiet the noise down. Simplify in your head and say, what element am I seeing? And then what do I have to do to bring that element out? The next sentence then is, well, how does it make me feel? And then you're getting into, is this color or contrast? And you're eliminating one immediately. And then you're saying, well, is it texture or pattern? And those are sort of usually lower on the list for me, so they're never first. Contrast and color seem to dominate. So, you know, this painting's about contrast. It doesn't mean it doesn't have color in it. You know, and it also says, well, it's about a stillness of a time. So watch the brushstrokes. And I think plein air painters get too excited with the, I'm going to show the spontaneity that I did this in a minute. And Sargent said, yeah, well, I did this in an hour and a half too. Don't forget, all my pictures were painted outside too. I didn't have a camera. And he's saying it's the absence of a brushstroke is showing the peacefulness. So just because you're outside with an hour and a half to paint doesn't mean you get that credit card with no limit and can put brushstrokes anywhere you please. So the next thing we start to do is we say, okay, so in the color class tomorrow, you know, where we're going through the history of color, I'm looking for one color that's everywhere in the painting, and I'm picking the bridge and the wall on the right. And I'm toning the whole thing with that color. And then I'm going to try to leave that tone in the shadows of the marble on the right, in the water, on the bridge. And there's areas throughout the whole painting where I'm trying to leave those colors. So now we start this painting of the boat.